In recent years, there has been much discussion about how the end of the world might unfold, as described in one of the most renowned books in the world, the Bible. No matter how much hope one might have for the end, it will be anything but pleasant. The Bible is the book we automatically associate with the apocalypse, Armageddon, Judgment Day, or the end of the world. This text not only predicts how this event might occur, but also describes the signs indicating its approach and what could happen in our times. You don't need to be a religious person to find this topic fascinating. Humanity has always been intrigued by the end of the world. Above all, we are eager to know the exact date when it might happen. In the long quest for such dates, people have turned to the writings of famous prophets like Parravicini, Nostradamus, the Mayan calendar, and others. In this video, we will explore what the most sold, published, translated, and distributed book in the world has to say about this topic. Whether you are a believer or a skeptic, you will find this subject fascinating. Some, especially devoted readers of this book, might wish that all these signs are merely coincidences. The Bible, composed of a total of 66 books across the Old and New Testaments, addresses the end times, the end of the world, or at least the end of the world as we know it. However, some books tackle this topic much more directly, such as the Gospels, where the teachings of Jesus of Nazareth present ideas about the end times. After his death, Jesus was gradually deified by generations of his loyal followers. The Book of Daniel, written by an ancient Jewish prophet exiled in Babylon, offers fascinating signs about the end of the world. One of the most notable is its claim that, before the end times, there would be an explosion of knowledge like never seen before. Humanity took hundreds of thousands of years to transition from cave living to agriculture. It took tens of thousands of years to progress from a stone knife to an iron sword, and nearly 10,000 years to move from carts to automobiles. However, starting in the 19th century, technological advancements began accelerating exponentially. Going from writing with a quill to printing pages took only 100 years. From the calculator to the smartphone capable of connecting with satellites outside Earth, just 50 years. Today, we are all witnesses to the rapid pace of technological progress. The devices we buy become obsolete in less than a year. Science has achieved remarkable feats, such as landing on the moon, placing space stations in orbit, and developing autonomous cars. Even the most affordable smartphones today boast more speed and storage capacity than the expensive computers from just a decade ago. This explosion of knowledge seems to be, just as Daniel predicted, a sign of the times. Science is abundant in our time, but it wasn't always this way. This accelerated development began to stand out in the 20th century, particularly in its latter half. According to the prophet Daniel, this rapid advancement of science would be one of the signs to occur before the end of the world. Additionally, Daniel prophesied that amid these scientific advancements, there would be great waves of migration, a phenomenon we can clearly observe in our time. Let's faithfully read what the biblical text says. "But you, Daniel, shut up the words, and seal the book until the time of the end. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall increase." The book of Daniel reveals more fascinating details about the events that will precede the end of the world, particularly a historic confrontation between two great powers identified as the King of the North and the King of the South. Over the centuries, the identity of these kings has changed, but many modern scholars, based on biblical chronology, suggest that today, the King of the North might represent Russia, while the King of the South could signify the United States. This North and South perspective should be understood from the vantage point of Israel, the focal point in many biblical prophecies. According to prophetic interpretation, before the end of times, these two great powers would be negotiating, something that has been associated with recent events. For example, the election of Donald Trump as President of the United States and his relationship with the President of Russia, as well as his interest in resolving the conflict in Ukraine, could be seen as signs of these negotiations. The prophecy mentions, "Then the two kings will think of doing harm to each other at the table of negotiation, seeking to deceive one another. The King of the North will return to his land with great wealth, and on his way, he will turn against Israel, the people of the Holy Covenant. He will carry out his plans and then return to his country. This could be interpreted as a possible withdrawal of Russia from the conflict in Ukraine to return to its territory, though in the process, and due to its alliances, it might end up facing Israel. The prophecy continues. When the time comes, he will invade the south again. But the outcome will be different. The ships of the coastlands of the west will make him flee in terror. Then the king of the north will unleash his wrath against the people of Israel, rewarding those who have forsaken the covenant. His army will desecrate the fortress of the temple, suspend the daily ritual sacrifice, and place there an abominable humiliation that causes destruction. This passage seems to suggest that, after retreating, Russia could attempt to invade once again, prompting a strong reaction from Western powers, whose naval strength would surpass that of Russia, forcing it to retreat. The prophecy also mentions the desecration of the temple in Israel, which suggests that another key event would be the construction of the third temple in Jerusalem, something that is currently in the works, though interrupted by the ongoing conflicts in Gaza. According to Daniel, these signs would culminate with the appearance of the Antichrist, who will sit in this temple and initiate the beginning of the end. If these events come to pass, they present a disturbing picture that seems to bring us ever closer to what the prophecies describe as the end of times. With Russia's invasion of Ukraine, Europe has once again experienced total war after decades of relative peace. This event came shortly after a global pandemic that paralyzed the world and was followed by devastating earthquakes that, in the last decade, have wreaked havoc in several countries. Skeptics might argue that earthquakes have always occurred, but it's important to pay attention to the current landscape. In the last decade, there has been a significant increase in both the frequency and severity of these events, setting historical records in terms of casualties and destruction. One of the most recent examples was the earthquake that struck Morocco just a few months ago. However, there's a detail in the words of Jesus that might have gone unnoticed by his followers in the first century due to their historical context. Back then, the people Jesus was speaking to had probably never seen the ocean, and their experience was limited to rivers or lakes. With this in mind, consider his words. There will be signs in the sun, the moon, and the stars, and on the earth, distress of nations, confused by the roaring of the sea and the waves. Luke 21:25. Here, Jesus seems to prophesy about great tsunamis, colossal waves capable of causing distress and confusion in entire populations. This becomes particularly relevant in a world where natural phenomena such as tsunamis have caused devastation in coastal areas, as seen in the Indian Ocean in 2004 or in Japan in 2011. The words of Jesus invite us to reflect on recent events and their possible connection to signs described in the Bible, which point toward the end of times. If we take a look at the tsunamis that have occurred in recent times, we notice that we have never seen anything like this in previous centuries, neither in number nor in the victims they have left. One of these disasters, as we remember, even triggered a nuclear crisis in Japan. This leads us to think that the sign of a fierce sea, with large waves capable of causing distress and confusion among people, has been fulfilled in a troubling way. And what is even more astonishing is that this prophecy was made by someone who had never seen a tsunami in their life, which makes its fulfillment in modern times even more intriguing. In addition to Jesus Christ, both the prophet John and the prophet Daniel in the Bible described various events and signs that would occur before the end of the world. But another apostle in the first century also described how people would behave in the last days. In his letter it can be read, "But know this, that in the last days perilous times will come. For men will be lovers of themselves, lovers of money, boasters, proud, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, unthankful, unholy, without natural affection, truce breakers, false accusers, incontinent, fierce, despisers of those that are good, traitors, heady, high-minded, lovers of pleasures more than lovers of God." 2 Timothy 3:1-4. It is hard not to notice how accurate this description seems when we compare it to humanity today. We live in a generation that, in many ways, reflects those characteristics of cynicism, selfishness, and moral decay that the Apostle Paul predicted in his letter to Timothy. A world where people's priorities seem to be focused on personal pleasure and greed, while traditional values and ethics are often relegated to the background. However, there is a particularly intriguing detail in Paul's prophecy: the appearance of religious fanatics going door to door, especially recruiting women. This point is so relevant today that it is hard not to recognize it in many organizations that, under the guise of religious devotion, display manipulative and deceptive practices. Does the image of those who knock on doors to preach sound familiar, appearing very religious but with seemingly different intentions? These are individuals who, under the guise of piety, often engage in deceiving and manipulating vulnerable people, particularly women, as mentioned in the prophecy. Paul, in his letter, said, "They will appear to be religious, but their actions will deny the power of devotion." Have nothing to do with such people. These are the ones who go from house to house, capturing weak women burdened with sins, who are led astray by all kinds of passions. They are always learning, but never able to come to the knowledge of the truth. Another sign that the end of the world is near, according to the Bible, is mentioned by the prophet Zephaniah, who predicts the total destruction of the city of Gaza and the disappearance of all its inhabitants. His prophecy says, "The city of Gaza will be deserted and desolate. At noon, those who live in Ashdod will be driven out, and the people of Ekron will be uprooted. Woe to you, people of Crete, who live by the sea. The Lord has pronounced this sentence against you. I will destroy you and leave you without inhabitants." Zephaniah 2:4-5. Does it sound familiar? It's impossible not to think of the current situation. Gaza, a place that has been the scene of so many conflicts throughout history, seems to fulfill one of the most striking prophecies. The violence, tragedy, and ongoing humanitarian crises affecting the region appear to align with the words of Zephaniah, who spoke of total destruction. But here arises a question. Are we facing a strange coincidence, or could biblical interpretations be more relevant than we think? Is it possible that what is happening today was already anticipated in ancient times? For many, the Bible is not just a book of stories, but a source of prophetic warnings. For believers, these words are proof of divine power, and how the Bible predicts the future with astounding accuracy. But for skeptics, it may seem like current events are being forced to fit prophecies from thousands of years ago. The truth is that the Bible, as a prophetic book, remains a powerful authority for millions of people. Despite differences in interpretation, the impact it has on how world events are perceived is undeniable. Is this prophecy a coincidence, or are we witnessing the fulfillment of what is written? The answer, perhaps, will depend on how each person interprets these ancient texts.